The movie begins with Lydia Dietz filming an episode of her paranormal talk show, Ghost House, where she interviews individuals who claim their homes are haunted. Since Lydia has the ability to see ghosts, she investigates these claims. During one taping, she's startled by what seems to be Beetlejuice sitting in the audience, a figure from her past that she hoped she'd never see again. After the show, Lydia, feeling uneasy, rushes to the bathroom. Rory, her boyfriend and manager, follows her. She tries to calm down with medication, but Rory throws the pills away. She convinces him to return them, and shortly after, Lydia is flooded with messages from her stepmother, Delia. At Delia's art gallery, Lydia learns her father, Charles, died in a plane crash. Though he survived the crash, he was tragically eaten by a shark. Together, Lydia and Delia begin planning for his funeral. Meanwhile, a young man falls into a construction pit and wakes up in a dim room in the afterlife. A ghost janitor points him toward an exit and then drinks cleaning fluid. As the janitor works, he accidentally revives Dolores, who reconstructs herself and demands to know Beetlejuice's whereabouts. When the janitor doesn't answer, she drains his soul, leaving him a hollow shell. At school, Lydia's daughter Astrid is teased by classmates for being different. Ignoring them, she returns to her dorm and doesn't answer Lydia's calls. Later, Lydia, Delia, and Rory drive to pick up Astrid. Rory suggests he should break the news about her grandfather, but Lydia insists she'll handle it. When they arrive, Delia dramatically scolds Astrid for being distant from Lydia, then blurts out the news of Charles's death, leaving Astrid in shock. Lydia tells Astrid they'll be going to Winter River for a few days, but Astrid insists she can't go due to school commitments. Although Lydia reassures her she's spoken to the principal, Astrid remains reluctant. As they talk, students in costumes appear, causing Lydia to panic. Annoyed, Astrid snaps at her, accusing Lydia and Delia of caring more about ghosts than family before storming off. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, Beetlejuice is summoned by Wolf Jackson, a ghost detective, who confronts him about Dolores. Beetlejuice reveals Dolores was his wife, who poisoned him after leading a soul-sucking cult. He chopped her to pieces before dying, but now she's back for revenge. Lydia, Astrid, Delia, and Rory finally arrive at Winter River and stay in Lydia's old house on the hill. Lydia tries to have a conversation with Astrid, who is still angry. Astrid expresses her frustration about her father who had died, but doesn't know much about. Astrid points out the irony, accusing Lydia of talking to ghosts for her show, but not to connect with her father's spirit. Elsewhere, Dolores, now fully restored, attacks another man, draining his soul. She then pulls out a cloth, transforming it into a black outfit. After the funeral, Rory approaches Astrid, offering to help her if she needs anything. Astrid, however, finds his behavior off-putting and awkward, and declined his offer. Outside, Delia is mingling with the guests who have come to pay their respects to Charles. Among them is a real estate agent, eager to show the house to potential buyers since Lydia has decided to sell the property. Rory steps out and publicly proposes to Lydia in front of everyone. Lydia, clearly uneasy and not wanting to accept, finds herself in an uncomfortable position. Astrid watches, but Lydia reluctantly agrees to the proposal under the pressure of the moment. Frustrated, Astrid takes off on a bike ride around town to clear her head. While riding, a car suddenly cuts her off, forcing her to swerve and crash into a fence, colliding with a tree. Nearby, a boy named Jeremy Fraser is sitting in his treehouse. When Astrid notices he's reading Crime and Punishment, she mentions that she has read it twice. The two begin to chat and share a brief moment of connection. Astrid tells him she's in town for her grandfather's funeral and reveals that her mother is Lydia Dietz. She also admits that, unlike her mother, she doesn't believe in ghosts, only in science. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, Dolores continues her search, moving through the ghostly realm. Wolf, who views himself as a detective of the afterlife, stumbles upon the bodies left in Dolores's wake. At the same time, Beetlejuice reads in a newspaper that Charles has passed away, and Lydia is in Winter River. Back in the real world, Delia tries to take a picture of herself crying. The family comes to check on her, and she nonchalantly explains that she's simply trying to capture the perfect shot of her grief. Later, Astrid ventures into the attic of the house and stumbles upon an old model of the town. While exploring, she finds a box labeled Richard, which contains old photos of her mother and father when they were younger. As she looks through them, Lydia walks in and starts explaining the backstory behind the pictures. As they talk, Astrid discovers a pamphlet for Beetlejuice and picks it up in surprise. Lydia, alarmed, warns her never to say Beetlejuice's name out loud, explaining that doing so could bring terrible consequences. She sternly tells Astrid that the attic is off limits and ushers her out. Later, Astrid goes over to Jeremy's house and they hang out in his room. While there, she discovers that Jeremy owns a copy of the handbook for the recently deceased, which he claims to have found at a yard sale in town. They make plans to meet up again at his place for Halloween the next night. Back at the house, Rory is busy packing, while Lydia sits quietly, visibly stressed. Suddenly, she gets a notification from Beetlejuice, which immediately sends her into panic mode. She rushes to the attic and begins yelling at the model town. Clearly agitated, Rory, confused, follows her and asks what's going on. Lydia finally opens up, telling him that when she was younger, a demon named Beetlejuice tricked her into saying his name, allowing him to come into the real world. He terrorized her and her family, even forcing her into marriage. That's why she's so terrified now. In an attempt to prove that nothing supernatural is happening, Rory recklessly says Beetlejuice's name 3 times. Instantly, both he and Lydia are transported into the model town, where she finds herself face to face with the trickster demon once more. Beetlejuice wastes no time playing cruel tricks, tormenting both Lydia and Rory. After enduring enough chaos, Lydia angrily shouts home 3 times, which pulls them out of the model and back into reality. Shaken but determined, Lydia immediately goes to find Astrid and Delia, telling them that they need to leave right away. She rushes outside, and Delia follows her. Lydia finally tells her that Beetlejuice has returned and is trapped in the model house. Astrid arrives in the middle of this, asking Lydia if they can stay until Halloween. Later on, Lydia drives Astrid to Jeremy's house for their planned hangout. Upstairs in his room, Jeremy compliments Astrid on her appearance, and the two share a kiss. Moments later, they find themselves mysteriously floating in the air. That's when Jeremy reveals his true nature. He's a ghost. He explains that he died after falling from his treehouse and now needs Astrid's help to bring him back to life, promising that if she helps him, she'll be able to see her father again. Meanwhile, Lydia speaks with a real estate agent who's handling the sale of her house. During the conversation, the agent mentions that the house Jeremy lived in has a dark history. It's considered a murder house. She goes on to explain that 23 years ago, Jeremy killed his parents, and before the police could arrest him, he died after falling from the treehouse. Horrified, Lydia realizes Astrid is in serious danger and races back to Jeremy's house. Inside, Jeremy convinces Astrid to read an incantation from the Asterisk handbook for the recently deceased Asterisk, which opens a portal to the afterlife. By the time Lydia arrives, it's too late. Astrid has already followed Jeremy through the portal. Panicking, Lydia grabs the book and heads into the afterlife herself. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the house, Delia is performing an elaborate ritual to honor Charles, using 2 asps she believes have been defanged. However, things quickly go wrong when both snakes bite her in the neck. Delia collapses, dead. With no other options left, Lydia reluctantly returns home and summons Beetlejuice. Lydia explains she needs his help to save Astrid. Beetlejuice agrees, on one condition: Lydia must marry him so he can escape from Dolores. With no other choice, Lydia agrees. Delighted, Beetlejuice opens a door to the afterlife and places Bob, one of the shrunken head guys, in his place in case anyone comes looking for him. Meanwhile, Wolf, the self-proclaimed afterlife cop, receives an alert about a living person breaking into the afterlife. He gathers his soldiers to investigate. At the same time, Delia wakes up in the afterlife, confused and surrounded by ghosts, unaware she's no longer among the living. Jeremy, revealing his true colors, admits to Astrid that he tricked her. His plan all along was to exchange her life for his. Leaving Astrid behind to be sent onto the Soul Train, he goes to get his pass stamped, thinking he's in the clear. However, as Astrid waits, she is spotted by her father, Richard, who rushes to her side. Dolores continues her rampage through the afterlife, draining another ghost of its soul. She eventually reaches Beetlejuice's department, but finds no sign of him or anyone else. Lydia catches up to Astrid just in time, preventing her from boarding the Soul Train. But as they attempt to escape through an emergency exit, they are transported to one of Saturn's moons. home to the dreaded sandworm. The giant creature emerges and gives chase, but just as it's about to catch them, Richard pulls Lydia and Astrid to safety. Afterward, Lydia, Astrid, and Richard share a heartwarming reunion, finally bonding as a family. Meanwhile, Wolf interrogates Bob, mistaking him for Beetlejuice due to his outfit. Delia, still unable to grasp that she's dead, calls on Beetlejuice to help her return to the living world. After Wolf leaves, Dolores arrives and drains Bob's soul, adding yet another victim to her spree. Back in the afterlife, Lydia, Astrid, and Richard race to stop Jeremy from getting his pass stamped and returning to the living. They reach the window just as Jeremy smugly announces it's too late. He mocks them, thinking he's won. However, the ghost who stamped his pass is revealed to be Beetlejuice himself. The stamp reads, "Out of luck." With a grin, Beetlejuice pulls a lever, opening a trapdoor beneath Jeremy, sending him straight to hell. After saying their goodbyes to Richard, Lydia and Astrid return to the living world. Astrid apologizes to Lydia for how she treated her, and they reconcile. However, they quickly remember the wedding is still set to happen at that very moment. Lydia heads to the chapel, only to find Beetlejuice and Delia arriving to stop the ceremony. Beetlejuice injects Rory with a truth serum. Under its influence, Rory confesses that he never believed in Lydia's paranormal abilities and was only marrying her for her money. Lydia is given a glove, which she uses to punch Rory across the room. Beetlejuice, determined to carry out his wedding plans with Lydia, traps the wedding guests inside their phones, distorting their faces and making them helpless spectators. He then launches into a musical number, dancing wildly. However, Wolf and his ghost cops arrive, freezing Beetlejuice in place. Dolores shows up, ready to cut the celebration short. Meanwhile, Astrid quickly grabs the handbook for the recently deceased and frantically searches for a way to stop the wedding. She draws a door on the floor leading to Saturn's moon, summoning the deadly sandworm once again. Beetlejuice narrowly avoids being eaten, but instead directs the sandworm toward Rory and Dolores, who are caught in its path and devoured. Before Beetlejuice can proceed with the wedding, Astrid finds a crucial loophole in the marriage contract. It turns out the agreement is invalid because Beetlejuice brought Lydia into the afterlife while she was still alive, something that voids the entire arrangement. Seizing the moment, Lydia says Beetlejuice's name 3 times, causing him to inflate like a balloon and explode into confetti, ending his mischief once and for all. Once Beetlejuice is gone, Wolf unfreezes and informs Lydia and Astrid that he must take Delia back to the afterlife. Delia bids them farewell, but promises to haunt them occasionally until she's ready to fully cross over. The family shares a heartfelt moment, reaffirming their love for Delia. In the afterlife, Delia is finally reunited with Charles, what's left of him at least, since some of his body was eaten by the shark. Sometime later, Lydia films her final episode of Ghost House, announcing her retirement so she can spend more time with Astrid. The two then plan a trip to Transylvania, where Astrid seems to have a crush on a boy dressed as Dracula. The movie ends with Astrid marrying the Dracula-like boy and later giving birth, but as she delivers, the baby turns out to be a grotesque version of Beetlejuice, who promptly kills the doctors in the room. Lydia suddenly wakes up, realizing it was all just a nightmare. But when she turns, she's horrified to see Beetlejuice lying next to her in bed. Startled, she wakes up again this time from the real nightmare. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed the video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.